watched the room's door for a long time, but it didn't move an inch. But honestly, that just spiked the terror even worse. Hearing someone talking right outside, and then they don't even try to come in. It was wrong on every level. I was still somewhat holding it together at this point. Terrified out of my mind, yeah, but my head was still clear. Trent and Feeder, though, were a totally different story. The fear had clearly completely shattered their nerves. Trent just kept repeating the same thing over and over. They got a lock on us. They found where we are. They know. We gotta haul ass out of here. Feeder was curled up on the floor, arms wrapped around his knees, shaking uncontrollably, just muttering under his breath to himself. Right then, a sudden thought clicked in my head. I threw out a plan. We can bail out through the second floor window. That snapped Trent back into reality. He immediately fired back. Yeah, the second floor window. We can drop out from there. But right at that exact second, the most deeply messed up thing happens. Trent finished his sentence and looked like he was about to say something else, but then his voice just abruptly cut off. He started spitting out complete, disjointed nonsense, even answering his own questions. We're never getting out. Yeah, we're gonna die in here. His eyes were totally glazed over. I saw he was spiraling fast, ran over to him immediately, grabbed his shoulders, shook him violently, even cracked him across the face, but the slap didn't do a damn thing. Trent stayed stuck in that trance, eyes completely vacant, zero focus, like he was staring straight through me. I had zero options left. The panic was eating me alive. I spun my head toward where Feeder was sitting, hoping he could help us. But Feeder was still planted on the floor, hugging his knees, vibrating with fear, looking at the state they were both in. I didn't have a choice. I had to handle this myself. I ignored them for the moment and started clawing the newspaper off the window. It took maybe a minute. I completely stripped every last piece of paper off the glass. Seeing the streetlights outside through the pane degrounded my nerves a little bit. But just as I was catching my breath, I accidentally caught our reflection in the window glass. There were two shadows right behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I whipped around to check. It was Trent and Feeder, no idea when they even stood up. They were just standing there, stiff as boards with their backs to me. I tentatively asked, "Yo, what's going on with you guys?" But neither of them reacted at all. Didn't turn around, didn't say a word. About 10 or 15 seconds dragged by. Then Trent spoke up in this totally flat, robotic tone. "Jumping from the window like this is too dangerous." Then Feeder chimed in, using the exact same deadpan voice. "Correct. There is rope in the adjacent room. We will go retrieve it together." The absolute second Feeder finished that sentence, two of them marched straight toward the door in lockstep. Without glancing back once, they opened the door and walked out of the room. Trent and Feeder have been my boys for a long time, but watching them move like that completely froze my blood. I knew in my gut. Those weren't the Trent and Feeder I knew. Either they were completely different people, or something else was pulling their strings. At that exact moment, the urge to just save myself and bolt was overpowering, but in the end, it just felt too messed up to leave them behind. I made the call to wait for them in the rooms. For a little while after they left, I could hear their footsteps moving away, then the sound of the door to the next room opening and shutting. Because the house was dead silent, the sound bled right through the drywalls. I heard Trent and Feeder seemingly talking to each other next door. Curiosity got the better of me, so I pressed my ear flush against the wall to listen, but the second my ear hit the drywall, their voices just abruptly cut off, replaced entirely by this horrific, warped laughing sound. I've known Trent and Feeder for years. Never in my life had I heard them make a sound anywhere near that deranged. That sealed it for me. I was making a break for it by myself. But when I actually went to force the window open, the frame was jammed shut, wouldn't budge an inch. After a few panicked attempts, the sound of the door next door opening echoed out. That sound sent a fresh spike of adrenaline through me. I immediately slammed my elbow into the window pane, but the glass didn't shatter. Then the footsteps started coming down the hall, getting closer and closer to the room I was in. They were practically at the door. My anxiety was peaking. I frantically scanned the room, realized there was space to hide under the bed. I scrambled straight under the frame, didn't dare make a peep, didn't even dare to breathe too hard, petrified they'd find me. A second later, the door swung open. The ones walking in were Trent and Feeder, coming back with a rope. They stood near the entrance for a second, like they were scanning the room for me. From under the bed, I had a limited view of the rooms. I saw Trent and Feeder actually brought back a coil of rope. That calmed me down a fraction. I was actually about to slide out and group back up with them, but then I remembered how unnaturally they were acting, and that sickening laugh. Decided it was smarter to hold off a second, just observe them a bit longer. A minute later, I was thanking God I made that choice, because they started moving again. They didn't say a single word, just marched straight to the windows. The same exact window I couldn't pry open 2 minutes ago. They popped it open with zero effort. Then they started speaking again in that dead mechanical cadence. Not a single inflection in their voices, just tie it here.
Okay.
After that, the two of them huddled over the desk sitting under the window, working on something. They kept at it for a few minutes, looked like they were rigging up the rope. Then, they both climbed up onto the windowsills, one after the other. Because the window was set so high up from under the bed, I completely lost sight of them. I could only hear them talking. All right, let's escape. Okay, the rope is secured around the neck. It's very tight. Hearing those words sucked all the air right out of my lungs. I had zero clue what was actually happening up there. But the literal second Feeder dropped that line, the desk in the room was violently yanked toward the window by some massive force, slammed brutally against the wall, made this deafening crash. One of the desk legs was even yanked up off the floor. Right after that came the sound of what seemed like two heavy objects repeatedly swinging and thudding against the exterior siding of the house, but it faded out pretty quick, and the silence crashed back in. By that point, I was curled into a ball under the bed, paralyzed with fear. I knew exactly what those two had just done. My brain kept flashing images of them dangling outside the house. I have no idea how long I stayed trapped under that bed, just completely spaced out, until another sudden noise ripped me out of that catatonic state. This noise didn't come from outside the window or the first floors. It came from deep down the hallway outside, and it was slowly, methodically moving toward the room I was in. Pretty soon, it stopped right outside the door. The footsteps cut out, the dead silence returned. I was beyond terrified. To keep myself from screaming, I clamped both hands violently over my mouth. Then the doorknob slowly turned, and the door crept open. I was petrified, refused to move a muscle. Eyes locked onto the space near the floor by the door. There was a pair of bare man's feet standing there. A second later, those feet stepped into the room, paced around the floor for a minute. Maybe it was just because the room was so pitch black, but those feet looked unnervingly white. A totally bloodless, dead white, right as I was agonizing over who those feet could possibly belong to. Without any warning, those feet stopped dead right next to the bed. I squeezed my hands over my mouth harder, praying to God I didn't make a sound, absolutely mortified that whoever those feet belonged to was about to suddenly bend down and look under the frame. Thank God he didn't. The owner of those feet stood perfectly still for a moment, then slowly pivoted back toward the door and walked out right as they hit the threshold. Those feet just seemed to melt into the darkness and vanished, and the door, without anyone pushing it, slowly clicked shut. After that, I heard the noise in the hallway again, fading further and further away, getting quieter. I waited until the sound had completely bled out into nothing, before I carefully dragged myself out from under the beds. I knew I had to get the hell out of there. If I stayed any longer, it was only a matter of time before they found me. At that point, the only way I could think of to bounce from the house was to climb down from the windows. I looked over at the window area. The rope was pulled incredibly taut. Those two were definitely hanging on the other side. There was another piece of unused rope sitting on the desk. One end was already tied to the desk frames. Just like the other one, I grabbed that loose rope to look at it. The other end had been tied off into a loop, about the size of a human head. I knew instantly this was the noose those two set up, tidying to get me to cosplay a damn Teru Teru Bozu doll. The realization sent a wave of cold sweat pouring down my back. Even though I was shaking with fear, I ultimately decided I was going to use that rope to rappel down. But right as I made that call, I suddenly got this crawling sensation that I was being watched, coming right from behind me. I instantly whipped my head around to check. Didn't spot anything out of the ordinary, but when I turned my head back and brought my eyes back to the rope, my vision caught two dark half-circle shapes hovering right at the window. When my eyes adjusted, I realized it was Trent and Feeder. They were clinging to the outside of the windowsill. Only the top half of their heads was visible, staring right at me. And the worst part, their eyes looked exactly like the ones we saw at the door downstairs, stretched completely wide open. Seeing that completely broke my brain. I stumbled backward in sheer panic. Didn't stop until my back slammed into the room's door. Right then, on the other side of the door, that same heavy thudding footstep that had drifted down the hall earlier started up again. I was completely hopeless. There was nowhere left in this place for me to actually hide anymore. In a blind panic, I threw myself into the wall-to-wall closet. It wasn't until I was inside that it hit me. If I got caught in here, I had zero escape routes. But by then, the owner of those footsteps had already entered the room. Too late to second-guess anything now. I just had to leave it up to fate. Whoever was making those footsteps did the same exact thing as last time. Paced a lap around the room, then walked over, opened the door, and left. That realization let me exhale a fraction. But right as I did, a totally different set of footsteps echoed inside the room. I didn't even hear the door open this time, and it was super obvious these footsteps were being made by dress shoes. That sound ripped the anxiety right back to the surface. I held my breath, refused to twitch a single muscle. Right then, a man's voice bled through the closet doors. "Is it inside here?" That sudden voice instantly redlined my terror to the absolute max. "It's in here, isn't it?" I felt whatever the hell was standing out there, man or ghost, was about to rip the closet doors open. So I threw my entire body weight against the doors from the inside, trying to keep them jammed shut. A second later, this massive violent force hit the doors from the outside, rattled the wood so hard it shrieked. Sounded like the whole frame was about to splinter apart. I'm not in here. I have no idea how long that went on. Suddenly, my grip slipped. The doors were violently yanked open from the outside. A blinding wave of light flashed across my face. It was so harsh, my vision totally whited out for a second. After that, it felt like someone was saying things to me. I don't remember any of it. I just remember I was crying hysterically and screaming the whole time. "I'm not in here, Dot." By the time my brain actually booted back up, I was already being dragged outside by the cops. Turns out, the guys who ripped the closet open and were talking to me were police officers the whole time. That same day, the cops hauled me down to the precinct for an investigation. Honestly, it was more of an interrogation, given that two people just died, and I was the sole survivor on the scene. I looked guilty as hell, sitting in that interrogation room. I laid out exactly what happened, start to finish, didn't leave out a single detail. They also ran the rope from the scene for prints that day. The results came back quick. My prints weren't on it. That finally cleared my name. But all the insane stuff I told them, the cops completely brushed off. Because inside that house, aside from the footprints belonging to the three of us, there wasn't a single other set of prints. But I do remember hearing one of the older cops mutter something under his breath. Of course, they survived by hiding in the closet again. Whatever the case, the police ultimately closed the case as a mutual suicide, and every single photo we took inside that house was permanently confiscated as evidence. While they were taking my statement, one of the cops asked me this one specific question, asked if, when I took the pictures in the study and the foyer, there was anyone else there besides the three of us. When the cop heard me say, "Key was only us three at the time," Otto's face completely dropped in disbelief. I am absolutely positive there was something caught on those photos. Also, the text carved into that clay dish. Apparently, it was written in the dialect of some indigenous tribe. Supposedly, the text described the path leading down to the underworld. Besides those details, I was kept totally in the dark, but honestly, I don't think this whole nightmare is actually over. Because ever since that night, whenever I glance out the window past midnight, I can always see Trent and Feeder clinging to the outside of my bedroom windows. Just the top half of their heads peeking over, staring dead at me. staring at me the entire damn night. When I told my parents about this, they dragged me to the hospital for a psych eval. The shrink just chalked it up to PTSD. Said it was just mild psychological trauma. But while I was sitting there explaining what I lived through, Trent and Feeder were pressed against the clinic window, staring at me. And this time, they had their entire heads pressed against the glass, just twisting and contorting their necks back and forth. I know exactly what's actually happening. This isn't some phantom trauma response. I can't explain the logic behind it. Maybe if I went back to that house one more time, I'd figure it out. Or maybe some doors are just meant to stay locked forever.